This time I'd like to turn everything over to Bill, who's going to take us through pretty much the rest of our time today. Bill.
Thank you, President Sean. Actually, many people are going to take us through our busy agenda, and we're a minute ahead of schedule, so that's really great. Many of the things that you've heard today, you've heard in bits and pieces, and I thought it would be wonderful at Anna's invitation, actually, to have a real focus on youth, the things that we've done in the past, and the things that we might do in the future. So we welcome that. And I just want to just check with Alan Macdonald, because I've asked him to tell a little bit about his involvement with the children in his school and their participation in the Heritage Fair and how they're connecting with Rotary. And Alan, I've put you down for around 12 minutes to 8. Is that going to be too late for you? Will that be okay?
Do you mean 12 minutes for now or 12 minutes total?
in just about 12 minutes before 8 o'clock. Will that be too late for you?
That's fine.
That would be great. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so now here's where we're going to start. We'll hear about youth exchange. We'll hear about our youth programs. We'll hear about the workforce pathways, many things. But we're going to start with all of you. All of you, and this is to help our treasurer Rick, you see, to build up our pool of funds. But our happy bucks are going to be all focused on youth, and where examples of where we've seen youth leaders or they're giving voice to their concerns or whatever, just any your involvement with youth exchange, whatever. And I'm going to start out with 7 happy bucks for the youth exchange students that Joan and I have posted, and I think if I'm lucky here, where's PowerPoint? Is that this one?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let me just see. I think I quickly grabbed a few pictures. Oh, these are. Let me just. Yeah, these are a few of our youth exchange students that we had over the years. Our first one was Risa. I don't have a picture of her. And she was from Japan and hardly spoke any English. And it was so wonderful when we met her at the airport, and Françine was there, who, and one of the, I don't know, 6 or 7 languages that she speaks fluently is Japanese, and she was able, and Arisa just broke down in tears. It was so wonderful to be greeted in her own language. And then a few years later, a story that we love to tell, after she had been studying in the States, she said, "Hi guys." So anyway, we've had, that's our happy buck. Okay, happy bucks, youth. John Farrow.
I'll follow up the youth exchange. One of the things that I've enjoyed a lot is our continuing contact with our youth exchange students as they've gone on to other parts of their lives. We've been really lucky to have visits back from Marica, and we've had visits back from Charlotte. We had virtual visits during COVID from Marioli and from Gabby to let us know how their lives are going, which was really a fantastic use of Zoom as we were trying to figure out how do we do meetings without being together in a room, and that was probably some of the best meetings we had, I think. And our exchange students here, I was conversing by Facebook with London the other day, who has become, she's a very entrepreneurial young lady and is now a consistent contributor to our auction, which is great, and has actually brought in a second donor, which is fantastic. And one more, just out of the blue, about a month ago, I had an email from Scott Campbell, who some of you may remember is the son of former charter member Mike Campbell, and he was an outbound exchange student from our club years ago to Japan. A great undertaking for a young man who suffered from dyslexia. You can imagine trying to learn Japanese and having the difficulties that you do when you have dyslexia, but he powered through it, and he contacted me about a month ago, He's trying to get back to visit his family this July and hopes to come to our meeting to talk about, he's in, I can't remember if it's Japan or China, to talk about a nonprofit that he has started and is trying to promote. So those connections as they grow into adulthood they're awesome. I really like that.
That's worth more than $1, John.
Well, that's $5. I mean, like, that's definitely worth more than $1.
Did you say 5?
Yeah, 5 sounds good.
Okay.
5 students.
Michelle.
So I'm kind of thinking to follow the trend that we started, and I'm not sure if our count for exchange students is 10, 12, or 14. It's kind of hard depending on how we count them. So we've been members of the club. So Rick joined the club at the behest of our second exchange student at the breakfast table, Mareike Lunning from Germany, who looked across the table and said, well, why aren't you a Rotarian? And she came from a Rotary family that was well steeped with both her father and her grandfather deeply involved in their small community through Rotary. But I'd echo John's statement. The other nice thing about having exchange students spread across the world is that as travel opens up and we get to travel again, you have hosts in other countries who at a minimum are always excited to show off the things that they're proud of within their city and that they connect to. And we've had that experience we met up with Elena and her boyfriend Florian in Paris a number of years ago. And it was just the sweetest thing because apparently Rick and I are not really well-versed in being able to traverse the subway, metro, getting ourselves to and from any places. And so Elena and Florian very kindly made sure that they showed up in our hotel room in the morning to collect us and take us around Paris, which I think was, they had a lot of fun, I think, with that role reversal, because of course we had ferried Elena quite a bit around Kingston. So I think that I'll call it 15 because we've had an extreme amount of joy. One of the places we'd love to get to visit, seeing Sunny on there from Taiwan. And another really great, a great exchange student that we really
That's wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. And who's next? Anybody online just want to talk about youth and youth?
Anna's got her hand up.
Anna's got her hand up.
Anna, okay, Anna, back to the room here. Anna.
Well, Ed and I hosted 2 exchange students from Norway and from Hungary, and both kids also brought their parents over for a visit, and so we had the opportunity of getting to know the parents and a little bit, and it was certainly, I'm going to say, very different for us to have kids in our house again, but it was a lot of fun in many ways. I think some of the best times were spent in the kitchen trying to duplicate the recipes from home without really having all the ingredients and trying to make it happen.
or the metric measuring cup.
Yeah. So, and then, eating it afterwards, and we thought it was delicious. They thought it was not. So that was really interesting. Anyway, so we had the pleasure of having spent the time. It was also challenging for us because we live in the country, so there was an awful lot of, early morning ride for the kids to get on the bus at 10 to 7 in the morning, and so they were glad to go on to another home after our break. Anyway, good times. So I'll put in that.
Okay, by the way, just sitting next to Anna, and they snuck in, and I didn't see you come in, is Matthew Brown, whom I met at the Rotary District Conference, and he was an outbound here. Was it 2 or 3 years ago?
It was 2019 to 2020, so coming up on 3 years actually. So yes.
Wow.
But then
Well, we'll be hearing from Matt later on when we're focusing on the youth exchange experience. So,
although if we're all going around sharing stories, I'd be more than happy to share a little bit right now.
well, please.
Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. So yes, I was an exchange student between 2019 and 2020, thanks to the Rotary Club of Kingston. I went to Switzerland, and honestly, I can say that it was truly a life-changing experience. Before then, just through high school, I felt like I was drifting through with no real initiative. But when I left and actually met so many of the most amazing, interesting people I've ever known in my life, and continue to call my friends to this day, and just got to have so much opportunity for adventure and novelty, it's almost definitely altered the whole direction of my life 100% for the better. And I have Rotary to thank for that. So I'd like to thank all of you. And
So I think you should charge us each a buck, each for that affirmation of the power of Rotary. And then Françine is next.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, sorry again for my lateness. I wish I still used the excuse of being a sleepy teenager, but definitely I'm all over that now. So.
Sleepy young adult.
Françine.
I think something really needs to be acknowledged actually about Matt's experience in that Matt was on exchange when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And they got brought home within like a 48-hour period of being told, hey, this is your year that you've been here, you're at almost the 9-month mark, and you have to get on a plane now, say goodbye to everybody, and you don't get to go back. So when we really didn't know what was going on. So he and his peers' experience was quite different than most exchanges. And at the district conference a couple of weeks ago, we had 2 out of our 7 students from that year. And I think it really needs to be acknowledged that that was a very challenging time. They then got to do part of their, return and rebound experience on Zoom, which you can imagine was not simple as far as it goes. Yeah. And I want to add that last weekend, I actually had the great pleasure of seeing Manon Lassalle, who was an exchange student with the Rotary Club of Gananoque in 2011-2012. She was back in town with her husband and her brother, whom I actually had the chance to meet, she and her brother, in Paris on her return. When she flew back, that was the year I was over doing counter-piracy and counterterrorism with NATO. And I had to go to a conference in Paris, and she and her mother and her grandmother and her brother met me to spend Bastille with me in Paris. And so it was really great fun to have a chance to meet them and see she's now growing the next generation, literally. She's due in September, and that's always really exciting. And then I had 2 interesting experiences. I was just in Yellowknife this past week, and on my flight home, I was hoping to get to see one of our past exchange students, and that was I don't know if you know Cheryl Haydock, remember Mark Haydock, his daughter Lauren. She's actually working in Yellowknife now, and she was flying in from Whitehorse, and I was flying out of Yellowknife, and we were really hoping to meet, but our flights were 15 minutes apart. We ended up actually getting to meet through the door of security as I was leaving the airport and she was entering. Literally we got to stand and talk for like 2 minutes at the door, which was wonderful. And I was hoping for the same experience the next morning because there was a girl from my exchange 30 plus years ago from Brazil who was traveling through Edmonton, but I landed and her flight left 7 minutes before. So sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes it does, but we certainly were connecting on it. And I think that's always that power of stay. So when you talk about 3 years later, still being in touch with people, 33 years later, still being in touch with someone is pretty amazing.
Thank you, Françine.
Robert
Reid online.
I was just remembering, you remember our exchange student, Sunny Chu?
Yeah.
Well, you may or may not remember, but Sunny made a workbench, like a workhorse, or a sawhorse, I guess is what I'm thinking. The one year that he was here, and I ended up buying it on an auction somehow. And so it's here at the cottage with me, and I think of Sunny every time I use that sawhorse. So it's going on, it's got to be 8 years ago, maybe something like that. And this sawhorse is still being put to use here, and I think of Sunny often.
One of the best things about Sunny was funny from a language perspective, and when you're finally comfortable in the language. At one point, something was going on, and there was a confusion over something, and he just looks and he goes, awkward. And he just answered everyone. We were just all in tears, right? It was really good.
Oh, yeah, Matt,
Mike.
Mike Brown, please.
Mike Wilson, but that's
Mike Wilson.
Mike Wilson, Matt Brown. We got it though.
Okay, Mike Wilson.
I would be remiss if I didn't say a few nice words about Bérénice, who is staying with us at this point. She's our second exchange student that we've had. Previously, we had A.N. Rodriguez from Spain, who some of you may have met, and that was pre-COVID. And then, everything, as Matt can tell us, everything kind of fell apart and hadn't been going on. But yeah, it's a true pleasure to have Bérénice in our home and to share some experiences with her. We had her at the cottage this weekend. She got introduced to the Canadian spring, Canadian bugs. Where thunderstorms just pop out of nowhere. Beautiful day like today, and then all of a sudden the clouds came in and they were stuck on the lake in the kayaks. We all ended up like drowned rats because I was cutting wood at my neighbor's and trying to get my boat covered in that. So anyways, but yeah, absolute pleasure to have had both of them, still have. She doesn't leave until July, but absolute pleasure to have these kids in our home and to share that experience with them. So,
Well, thank you, everyone. One last call? Okay, thank you. Anyway, we're going to hear a little bit more about youth exchange a little later on, but I want to shift now to younger youths, to children, and we had a couple of weeks ago, we've always been supporters of the Heritage Fair. And we've been involved, and people who support the program have the opportunity when they have their celebration to be there and provide some activities and some interest about whether it's a museum or in our case a Rotary Club, so that the students can learn about organizations and things that have some historical importance or interest. So we were there was it 2 weeks ago now? 2 weeks ago this Friday. And you may have noticed around Anna's table some little flowers. We're going to hear about those. And also I hope some of you have planted your sunflower seeds. This was a school that planted some. So these were two activities that we had that we're going to tell you about a little later. But in the interest of time, I'm going to actually turn things over to Alan Macdonald, because stars of this program were among his students. And so they participated in this event. And so I'm going to ask Alan to say a little bit about that participation. And then just to also say a little bit about his take on how his students at Loughborough Public School are starting to connect with Rotary and be part of the Rotary family. So Alan, over to you, because I think you have your classes coming in just in a few minutes and school.
Okay, I can hear them arriving. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, we were really pleased to see friends at the Heritage Fair. It was nice to be back in person at the Heritage Fair after 3 years of pandemic. And our program has been participants in that fair for many, many years. And students did really well. There was a grade 6 class there and a grade 7, and there were 6 awards across the two classes. And one of our classes, they did very well. We're very proud of their hard work. And one of our projects from our classroom has been selected to go on to the provincials in Toronto. So we're really pleased for that as well. And when we arrived, during the day at the fair, as well as getting awards, there are short workshops, as Bill said, and the Rotary Club was putting on one where students got the opportunity to support an initiative from someone at Trent University who was beading small felt flowers that represented the many children who sadly perished at residential schools. And the idea is to create 10,000 of these flowers, each representing a child who was part of that experience. As well, there was the Montreal Rotary Club initiative to sell sunflower seeds, and we got to plant a few, and Bill Gray had been at Loughborough a week or two before and delivered our 100 packets of seeds to the school. And now students are taking on some initiative there and a little bit of leadership, making announcements. They sold a few during their musical last week that we had running for 7 performances. So those things are coming along. I'm hoping that that becomes a little segue into maybe getting into more leadership and Rotary connected opportunities at Loughborough. We, as was mentioned earlier, we also have a tour with the Oddfellows and Rebecca's coming up on the 31st. And we're also hosting on June 13th, Hannah Williams and some students from Pathways Kingston who'll be coming to the Dome and taking a tour with those youth. And long term, well, I guess midterm, we usually have students volunteering in the food bank garden just up the road that our program has been supporting for about 10 or 11 years now. And with COVID, that was more difficult, but we're hoping to get back into that and have students on their own show up over the summer and put in some hours, and as well put in some hours at our Dome. And even longer term, on 2025, we're looking a little bit at having a little forest. We've been working with Little Forests Kingston, which, as you know, plants a very intense and dense plantation of trees that grow better through symbiotic relationships together. We're looking at getting a little forest as well in the Loughborough schoolyard. So we've been meeting with folks like Maureen Buchanan and Joanne Whitfield and Joyce Hoyston to get that going. So there are lots of irons in the fire here at Loughborough. So we appreciate everyone's support with that.
Well, Alan, please know, as I'm sure you know, just how deeply we appreciate our connection with you and your students. And when they arrive this morning, please give them warm greetings from all of us and wish them a great day. And
I should mention, Bill.
Oh, one more thing, good.
Well, it was just a cute little anecdote. When we arrived, they're 12 years old, and so sometimes they need reminders about who people are and what's going on. I said, oh, look, guys, it's Rotary. Remember, they came and they supported us with the little food forest, and they support us with the Dome and the kitchen. You know who these people are. You've met them before. And I said, oh, it's them. Oh, and I could hear this little thank you. And that's, for 12-year-olds, spontaneous thank yous is pretty, it's pretty good. So they're learning who Rotary is. And I think we'll see more activity from them in the future.
Well, step by step, we look forward to continuing to grow this relationship with you and your school family there.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. So I know at some point you'll need to slip away, but it's wonderful to have you with us and as a member of our club too. So thank you, Alan. Well, now, thanks. Okay. As I mentioned, we had 2 activities, and one of them was maybe I can. Well, I won't show the video, but you have a link to it. I think I sent it out. But one person who is First Nations herself, a teacher, and now doing doctoral studies at York University, said she had to do something. And so she got the idea of, we have Orange Shirt Day and so on, but actually beading orange flowers with orange beads. And she's been doing workshops. She was at our Rotary convention, and we all were involved there, those of us who were there, in adding a few beads to flowers. And then I thought, well, let's take this. She's inviting people wherever to participate in this. Well, so we brought them home, and we took them to the Heritage Fair. Now, I also had, at each of these groups, when they came, I said, one of you has to be a reporter, and I had a bunch of questions for them. You see, well, what have you heard? What do you know about residential schools and the children, whatever? They know a lot. And one of them said, and she started rattling off all these, there were this many children here, whatever, just at this nation. And she had done her heritage project on this. So that's something that really came out to me, that spoke to me. these children know about this history, and we didn't when we were children. And it's only lately that we've been learning about it. They know, and they care, and this was a way. So Anna, give us your take on this activity, because you've carried it a little further too.
Yes, I did. But it was really interesting to have the kids come in a rush. They would arrive, each group at a time, and then immediately they saw beading and they would get really excited. Oh, we're gonna bead, and then we would, stop them for a minute and tell them what it was about. And then you saw this natural slow down and really take it seriously and try to do as much as they could. So they were adding beads to existing flowers, so they weren't starting new ones. Well, the first group started, and then the kids after that were adding beads to the project. And so I thought it was marvelous, because as they were going through the questions and their scribe was writing it down, there was a lot of conversation amongst the kids about it. So the questions were, what do you know about the history of residential schools for Indigenous children in Canada? What did it feel like to bead a flower with your classmates? Why do you think we should remember the children who were buried in unmarked graves? And other thoughts about creating this garden of hope with all of these flowers. And they were just thrilled that they were part of this activity and this action of creating this garden of hope. So I loved the activity. And then we also had seeds for the Save the Children of Ukraine, and each group planted a half of an egg carton of seeds, and they were all happy. It was really fun to watch the kids. Okay, I have one seed, I'll put it in, and then someone else would say, I'm watering it, and they were all so very excited to have this little package of 6 seeds that they were to take back to their school and planted somewhere in their schoolyard. So anyway, it was a really great, fun morning to spend. Very fast, lots of kids coming through, and before you know it, it was noon and it was time to pack up and go. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and Sat, who is one of our most recent members, was there, and he was right into it totally. Unfortunately, his work schedule doesn't allow him to be with us today, but without him, he just kept us all organized and labeled all these and so on, because we were some of them didn't pick them up, so we've been delivering them, and because we had a bunch of questions that they had to figure out, like, where are you going to plant these and whatever. And one class, one of the kids, they voted, so you saw all these hands going up. Well, should we put it here? How many states should go here? Whatever. Or they had all this discussion. So, and then how are you going to look after? Who's going to water? Well, you live closer to school than I do, whatever. But anyway, and then what do you want people to know about this? The significance of these seeds. So then I've been emailing what they wrote back to the teachers, so they'll have those thoughts of the children, and they can follow through in any way they see fit in their classes. So hopefully there'll be a few schools that'll have some of these seeds and some class discussion. So again, they'll be connected with that. And that's just a little thing that we did as Rotarians.
I also asked the kids if they could, if they were comfortable with that they would take pictures when the flowers are in bloom, and then send them to us, and maybe we could create some sort of a collage of all of these kids with sunflowers, and send it somehow to Ukraine, so that it is creating the hope that we would like to express to the kids.
So they're the voters. And there's just a little bit of the activity.
Comments.
The beading, and then planting the sunflower seeds.
It was fun.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Anna, for being part of that, and thank you, Sat, although he's not with us today. and we've also heard from Loughborough. Now
If you want to be.
you've heard a little bit about our relationship with Pathways. This has a long history of several years and of extending the Pathway support for high school age, beyond high school. And the pilot showed that changed in just one semester of post-secondary. We changed the retention rate from 30 to 80% or some fantastic effect like that. That was so strong that under the leadership of John Gale, we decided to have an international project supported from clubs, including clubs from India, right here in Kingston. And that got hit by pandemic and staff changes and so on. And with Greg's leadership and others, we've shifted our way of thinking about that. And I think part of our thinking is that we don't just do projects, we do projects as a start of building a relationship that will last. And that has been starting to help through Pathways. We thought, well, we'd have mentors, and we trained mentors for the graduates from the program, so that just didn't happen. Well, they didn't know us. But now, starting with Greg and Anna, and hopefully, I'm hoping to join them next year. I know John Gale wants to join them. They're beginning a relationship to get to know the students who are in Pathways. So when they do graduate, we can stay with them and follow through with them on their journey. So I'm wondering if Anna and Greg, you'd say a little bit about how that's going, because you've just been starting that in the last few months.
So I'll kick it off, and I'll back up a little bit. So under John Gale's leadership, we set up the international project called FAR, Facility Alumni Relations, to help the students. Pathways Core helps support students to get through high school. Then they're dropping over the edge, not able to navigate the next step. So FAR was to help support students navigate the next step, to post-secondary, college or university, and now we know we need to also help them navigate the next step to the trades, and that needs work. And so as we look for projects, and part of that initiative was to set up a mentoring program, which really never did fly, for all the reasons Bill said. When you show up and say, I'm your mentor, you see people run real fast. As mentoring, of course, is built on trust. So that was the core. But then as we did the thinking about how do we want to help youth in the city, we said, build on FAR, as opposed to find another project. So build on FAR. And so the journey since then really has been, how can we help youth in the city building on the Pathways relationship, if you want to put it that way. And because, across the Pathways serving area is a postal code. Well, across the street, there's kids in exactly the same position that don't have the supports of Pathways. So how do we help them? And so KSS is one of the serving schools, so there's a dialogue been going on that really has been truncated because the staff's so busy, complicated by COVID, that really we haven't been able to get stuff in shape. But building on the Pathways relationship will come someday, how to help the students across the street that need it just as much. And so what I think we're on here is a journey of, we don't need to look for other projects standalone for youth, to help youth in the city. We need to continue the journey of how do we build on the Pathways relationship, right? And so the piece that Bill has been talking to, that Anna and I are involved in, is, so how do we help the Pathways relationship and the students by just showing up. So volunteer, they have a format where 3 days a week from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 3 in the afternoon to 6 in the afternoon, they have a drop-in. Pathways, the organization has a drop-in for Pathway students. So they drop in. Some of them want to do homework, some of them just don't want to go home, some of them want to do whatever. And so there's a set of volunteers that show up to support Pathways. Some of them are Queen's students. Quite a delegation from Queen's putting time in to help these folks. And so that's our entry for Rotarians to show up. And so Lon and I are showing up, and it's a pretty rigorous process to get through to be allowed to do that. And we're getting to know them. I mean, I miss Dylan's readout, but I've seen Dylan in action in the kitchen at Pathways. And so some of you remember we had Talon and Lexi here, who were students that we sponsored on RYLA last year. See those two in action. They're born leaders in the environment where they are. And I watched Lexi twist. So this year, I don't know how it turned out, but this year RYLA was having trouble getting enough volunteers to make the program fly. So Lexi's in this drop-in center twisting arms for students to volunteer to help and help RYLA. And, so we're getting to know them, and so from that will come all kinds of things. So Anna's probably more connected to the students than I am, but.
Well, I'm getting there. I'm getting these breakthroughs every single week, and it's just amazing. And when I first arrived, I was told that I was asked if I could bring a craft or something, and I decided that I would start with knitting crochet and see who wants to do it. Well, it turns out to be a lad in grade 9 who wants to learn to knit. And so we sit down and we fumble through it, and then we get on to something else that he's doing, the frog, which I have a task for you, right, regarding the frog. So we start to make frogs with felt and just a sewing project. So that's been fun. And then the last couple of weeks have been rather amazing. So I think I shared with you the story about a young woman from a young girl from Afghanistan who spoke very, very, very little English. And so my task was to help her with some homework. And that was really heartbreaking to see how lonely she was, because she has difficulty with language, and she started school without knowing anyone, and very far away from her family, rather lonely, and and she has no friends. So I take her aside. The following week, I took her aside to a room so that I could actually spend quality time with her and help her with a job application. It's important. So that took about 2 hours, but she got it done, and she read through the routines of the job. I learned an awful lot of routines. And then this week she showed up and she went to sit with the kids. And so I went over to the table and I thought, this was really great. She's sitting with kids. And I said, so you got the job? And she said, yes, I love it. I love it. I know how to do double doubles. That was really fun. And then I said, and then after I was watching her, I walked away and I watched her throughout that a couple of hours. And then as she was leaving, I asked her to come over and I said, you've made friends? She said, yes, I'm happy now. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it was just made me happy. And so I brought the little flowers in also last week. And I got, it was really a busy time because they were showcasing Pathways to, the registration was happening, and for next year, for the grade 8s to register for next year's pathway. So parents were there, and each group of parents were being hosted by a graduate or a child that was graduating this year. And then they would come, and Lexi was one of these folks. And then she would come in and she said, "Oh, and did I tell you there's Rotarians here?" And the Rotarians just, they help us out. They talk to the kids, and it's okay, they're nice people. So there's, this affirmation that we were not monsters, right? So, and I think that that's the gist of it, is introducing projects to the kids and being there with them and just listening and responding, but not really telling them what to do, just responding. And I think that I'm seeing little by little that the kids are coming forward, sitting with us, wanting to find out what we're up to. Greg goes around and does homework. I see you checking Dr. Google.
And the textbooks.
And the textbooks.
Yeah.
They're not
Got
the
those
same.
a long time ago.
I just think it's
My
an
head hurts.
amazing opportunity for us to do this service to the community and be there with the kids. And maybe over through conversation, just make them feel comfortable to be with other people other than their classmates and Pathways kids, because they really don't have an opportunity to be out in the community like a lot of other kids do. And that's important to know, is that we may be that influence on them that is different than what they're accustomed to.
Anna, this is a rich and wonderful story. I'm going to adjust our agenda because I want us to get back to youth exchange.
Sorry,
And no, that's fine. And Greg, just one.
So I just wanted to add a comment on another aspect of this relationship. And that is, I'll be so bold as to say that the management of Pathways is starting to understand what value we can provide them, right? In terms of navigating the city, navigating contacts, poking them about different approaches and so on. And so this is a relationship that's got a lot of legs.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Greg and Anna. And we've, as you know, we involve students, including students from Pathways, and the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, RYLA, RYLA, and in various adventures programs. We're going to hear, I hope soon, because RYLA starts this week. We've got 2 from Pathways, 1 from the Boys and Girls Club that we're sponsoring, and we need to get them in. I think at that time, I'll say a little bit more about all the adventures programs and our involvement with that. So we'll leave that for the moment, but they're also, through the work of our national and regional committee that we formed, I think about 6 years ago, under Robert Reid's leadership, there are many things that they do that also benefit youth. And Robert, could you maybe just take a moment and give us just 1 or 2 highlights, and then when we go back to when we have our RYLA students, we'll maybe ask you to say more then, but maybe just 1 or 2 highlights right now.
Sure. Turns out this year we did 3 of the projects that we supported. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. 3 of the projects that we supported this year were youth driven. And one of them we've heard about through Dylan. So that was Rotary HIP with the Youth to Youth Exchange in Winnipeg. And we had Dylan speak to us a couple weeks ago about that. So you're familiar with that. The other one that we supported, do you remember we collected laptops and donated them to a school in Nebenamick, also known as Summer Beaver. And we collected those laptops and donated them through our Indigenous Peoples Partnership Cluster. But because of that relationship with the cluster, we got to know the teacher and the school in Nebenamick. And it turns out that they, Alan, if you can still hear you, this will be interesting. Every other year, they try to take the kids from that school to Toronto for a number of days because a lot of them have never left their community. So to do a trip to Toronto for 10 to 15 students and a few chaperones, it's $60,000. And it's $60,000 because they have to fly to Thunder Bay and then on to Toronto. So they had a fundraising going before COVID, and they had raised $35,000. And that's through bake sales and 50-50 draws and so on. Anyway, we did support that this year, and they ended up raising over the $60,000. So these kids are going to go to Toronto June 4th to June the 10th. They have made arrangements to stay in residence at U of T. They are going to the ROM, CN Tower, Ontario Science Centre, Queen's Park, Medieval Times, Ripley's Aquarium, Canada's Wonderland, Hockey Hall of Fame, going to ride the subway and go to a Blue Jays game. And there's I think a day trip to Niagara Falls. And so these kids, and the idea is it's a 7-8 class. So if you go in grade 7, you don't go in grade 8. But if you didn't get a chance to go in grade 7, so then you go in grade 8. So they do it every other year so that you get the experience when you're in grade 7 and 8. So we talked loosely in the committee about trying to go to Toronto and maybe even meet up with them. And we haven't finalized anything with that, but there's potential there. The other thing we just supported was with Focus Forward for Indigenous Youth. And, we've done a couple projects with them in the past with greenhouses in Montreal Lake Cree Nation and on Manitoulin Island. But anyway, they are doing a project in Tyendinaga, Mohawk territory. And there is a new cultural language center being built, and Focus Forward is going to do some training as part of that. So this will be an 8-week-long job sort of placement program. They're going to work with the high school in Napanee, the high school in Belleville, and there's an alternative learning school, I think, on Tyendinaga. So this will be for youth. There's going to be 12 youth, ages 15 to 29, and they'll be doing on-site training with working at heights, get CPR certification. So we're really looking forward to that, and we're definitely going to Tyendinaga during that project. So, the National Committee doesn't have a specific, mandate about dealing with youth, but the projects that came to us this year, just all the ones that appealed to us all were youth driven. So it's just the way the year went for us, but really excited for all these projects. And again, with Dylan representing this district with Rotary HIP, sort of ties back to the Pathways program. And we wouldn't have connected with Dylan without everything else that's going on in the club in terms of youth and the mentoring that's going on there. So anyway, that's just a bit of a quick summary.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I think we're really beginning to see in this meeting just how interconnected is the work of all of our committees and our service subgroups, and how youth are part of it. Now, let's turn it over to Michelle, who has been very, very active for many years in our Youth Services Committee, and as she and Rick hosted, I'd forgotten this story that it was a youth exchange student that we owe to have Rick as such a vibrant and contributing member of our club. So that's been wonderful. Now Michelle has a special talent for interviewing people, so she's going to talk with Bérénice. Okay, Michelle, over to you.
Well, thank you, Bill. So welcome, Bérénice. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you for joining us this morning. So I'm going to get right into it. So Bérénice, you obviously something sparked your interest in doing an international exchange. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you wanted to go on this year-long adventure away from your family.
So it all started when my brother did it. So he went to the United States in 2018, I think. So he went there, and then we went and picked him up at the end of his exchange, and we got to meet like his host families and his counselors and everything. And starting that point, I was like, I kind of want to do that later too, 'cause that seems pretty cool. And then COVID happened, and I was like, so we were stuck at home, obviously, like everyone. And then school was just like, school in France was like very stressful at some point. I was like, I need a break. And I've been wanting to like go away for a long time. I've been wanting to do this exchange since my brother did it. I was like, this is just the opportunity to do it. And I've got the Rotary from my town that's like ready to sponsor me, and another kid they sponsored 2 of us. And yeah, that's how I went to do it, mainly because my brother.
So every district is just a little bit different in how we organize the exchanges. And I know in our district that there's a bit of a wish list that gets developed by the students who are on outbound as to the different countries that they might like to visit. And we put a lot around the table in discussing about what the objectives are to go. So what made you put Canada on your list?
Well, I kind of always wanted to come here. So since I was little, I don't know, we have this big idea that first of all, Canadians are supposed to be nice. So that helps. And then, well, I kind of love being outside in the outdoors and stuff. And yeah, well, Canada has like some pretty great outdoors, and here it's like awesome with all the lakes and stuff. And also, well, the English part of it. So I wanted to like learn English more and like, get better at speaking English. And I was like, no, I'm not going to the US. And the UK was just kind of too close. And Australia was too hard. Like all the stuff they have in Australia, I was like, nope. But yeah.
Is that the snakes?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, there's the most deadly things on the planet, I think, are in Australia.
Yeah.
So I understand why staying away from there might be. So how have you, thinking about like your high school experience here compared to your high school experience at home, what's the same, what's different? What did you like about high school here? What did you not like about high school?
So totally different, first of all. So high school in France is a lot more during the day. So it's from like 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. unless just on the Wednesdays until noon, but like it's a lot of time, and I feel like a lot more homework, and then the sports are not included with the school, so if you want to do that, you do it outside of school. We do get more holidays, like 2 holidays, 2 weeks, and like a lot of 2 weeks holidays, but then like there's just so much pressure during the whole time you're in school that those holidays are like super necessary because everyone's gonna burn out the first week, like just sleeping because we're all tired. Whereas like here, so we start later and we finish sooner, and then you have sports that's included with the school, and the relationships sometimes with the teachers are like very different. Like I feel like kids here are closer to the teachers, if they like the teachers, obviously. And like in France, like they kind of like talk about stuff and everything. And what else is different? Well, it's by semesters, whereas like in France you choose like there's like subjects that everyone has to choose, and then you choose a couple other subjects, but they're like for the whole year, and you don't change every semester, and your timetable is different every day, so it's like by weeks instead of by day, which can be good if you don't like your teachers. Like here, in my first semester, I had a couple of classes I was like not the best, and like having them every day sometimes was like, but I don't know. It's kind of nice also to like only have that short time in school, and then you have so much time after to do everything you want, like sports and time for homework and go out with your friends. And yeah.
What has been the most surprising thing that's happened so far this exchange year for you?
Like in school or just like
anything?
I don't know.
What surprised you the most? Was there anything that you were expecting when you as part of your experience that either hasn't happened or something that just didn't happen at all the way that you thought it would?
I don't know. Something that surprised me maybe was like the fact all the kids that were working, like trying to like make friends and like, oh, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And they're like, I can't. I'm like working. And some of them were like working every day after school, and you're like, oh my god. But that's something that I was surprised with a lot at the beginning, because that's not a thing in France, just simply because we don't have time. Like, you might be working during the summer, but if you're under 18, probably not. And then another thing was like all the driving and the fact that like distances were something like, so for example, my grandmother lives like 3 hours and a half away from me, and every time we have to like go up or just like the weekend, we're like, this is so long. And then here people are like doing 3 hours just for the day, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, we find that that's a common experience with exchange students who would like to just pop over to Calgary for the weekend. Not quite a reasonable expectation. So what would you say is so far, because you still have quite a bit of your exchange left, you won't be leaving until July, and there's a lot of fun activities that still happen because, you know, like spring is here now, as Mike said earlier, so you know, we have some decent weather. So what would you like to do, you know, with these remaining weeks that you have? Is there something you haven't done yet or experienced yet?
Well, I'm going to Niagara Falls at the end of the month, so that's exciting. And I don't know what I would like to do. Just like, yeah, go out with my friends more than the weekend probably, because we were like, everyone was kind of just like staying at home after because it was cold and everything. But yeah, I don't know. Enjoying my time with Les.
So you've accomplished some of the things that you were hoping to while you've been here.
Yeah.
Now, Matthew, I'm going to turn a question or two to you, because you've had your experience in Switzerland, and as Wilson said, it was a slightly different than what we would typically, but you mentioned about it being a life-changing experience for you. So maybe you can tell us, you know, one or two things that you carried forward with you from your exchange experience. What really left its mark on you?
It definitely inspired more of a sense of adventure in me, I'd say. Just the ability to, you know, go out into the world and see so much for the first time and actually experience so much freedom that I've never really had before. Because by the time I was leaving, I was maybe 17. I think I still had my learner's permit at the time, so it's not like I could just hop into my car and go anywhere here in the country. But in Switzerland, the Rotary Club there was kind enough to give me pretty much a free pass to all the public transit in the country. And Swiss Transit being Swiss Transit, that pretty much meant I had free reign over the entire country, which combined with Google Maps meant that any friend could just send me a location in the country, say, hey, want to meet here? I look it up, go to the transit app, and it'll tell me how to get there with the trains down to the minute, and I'd be able to be there after 4 hours. So that level of freedom was something I'd never experienced before in Canada, and honestly, I don't think I've even experienced since, even with my car. And so that kind of freedom and the ability to have that much adventure and live a little more impulsively definitely has stuck with me. And I hope to carry it forward. I actually hope in the coming semesters I might be able to go to France at some point and hopefully maybe stay there on a working holiday visa. So we'll see.
So while you were in Switzerland, how did you adapt to the different languages? Because I think there's more than just one official language in Switzerland. Was that a challenge for you?
It was, yeah, because in Switzerland, not only are there 3 different languages that exist in one country, sort of how in Canada we have the French and English divide. Not only that, but the German that's spoken in Switzerland is actually fairly different from High German, which is what's spoken in Germany, or Austrian German. So I was studying one German, High German, while everybody around me was pretty much speaking an entirely different dialect. So my host family was kind enough to try and speak High German to me whenever they could, but obviously in day-to-day life, it's, you know, people revert back to their native language and just go back to their own dialogues. So regrettably, I didn't ever achieve a full fluency in German, but I have a sort of conversational proficiency that I'm still trying to work on, even if I am a bit rusty in it.
So I know that we're getting close to time, so I've kind of stolen some time because we don't need all that much for drawing our card, but I want to leave enough time for Leslie. But sort of a final thought for you, Bérénice. So what do you hope that will last with you from this experience?
So like I came here and I had to like, you kind of have to like push all your thoughts away of like, what are people going to think about me if I do that? Or like all this like prejudgment that we already do on ourselves before doing the actions. This you kind of have to like push it away when you come here, because like if you want to make friends, if you want to meet people, you have to just go and like go and meet them instead of like thinking about, oh, what if I do that? What are they going to think of me? So like I hope that this I'm gonna take with me. Same like I think being spontaneous is like one thing that I had a lot, like it was really hard for me last year. Like I like when everything is like planned and stuff and everything, and like you came here and sometimes things are organized like the day before, and I'm like, okay, this is fine. So I want to take some of that home with me, and yeah, just the whole experience is like being more open and spontaneous. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bérénice, and thank you, Matthew, for joining us today, giving us a bit of a sense on the almost to the tail end of an experience and a reflective perspective on the experience of being a host mom. And I'm sure, Mike, you can attest to this. I remember when Amanda was our exchange student at the time that we were exchange student in Brazil or Mexico.
Spain.
Amanda was Spain and Anne was.
It was Spanish.
Okay, so you see, you get going too long in the geographies. You know, it's a wonderful experience to be able to welcome you into our club, into our homes. We certainly gain a lot from having you with us, and maybe some lessons learned around the table today that being spontaneous and accepting life as it comes, that we can walk with.
Can I add one tiny piece? So in the recruiting piece, which we're always looking, and we know your club is hoping to get back into the involvement perhaps in a shorter term program rather than longer term. There is an added program this year for the first time that we're participating in. It's been happening in Europe for a long time. There's also a camp or tour option. So, which would be where kids here get to go to camp. But from the international perspective, is they get to go to an international camp. And some of them are highly affordable. Obviously a plane ticket to go with it, but the camps themselves are sometimes 100 euros. And they get to spend 2 weeks doing, yeah, exactly, geez. And they get to be with other international kids, and they normally pick no more than one per gender per country. And so we actually have a student this year going to Egypt. He's got an Egyptology camp for 2.5 weeks. So that's our first camp experience, and we're likely also going to be sponsoring a camp next year for next summer. So that's something that's new and different to youth exchange, so over and above the year-long, the short-term, and then that. And I know you're about to lose it from a time perspective, so.
Of course, we can spend a whole session.
We got it. Either that or you're gonna answer your pants, I don't know which.
We could spend a whole session just with Françine from her own youth exchange experience to all that she's done and now leading us at the district level, but we'll Françine, maybe we can invite you back another time and you can share that. Leslie, over to you. I shortened your 7 minutes into 30 seconds.
I have to work at
Me
9
too.
o'clock.
Me too, I got it.
Sorry, and I can relate to your I'm stretching my goals when I find out I have a job to do at 8 o'clock at night for the next morning. So I can appreciate that, but I take it on as a challenge to do my best in the situation. Rotary stretches my goals for me. All throughout today, I keep hearing a continuous theme, and it's planting and growing and nourishing and building, and that nourishing is building relationships and trust. And as we were chatting, you can't mentor unless you have that cred with people, whether it be youth or whether it be adults. You have to have time to nourish that relationship. And given that, I see that similar activities in our whether it be working with youth or planting seeds or selling seeds for the children in Ukraine, or the children in Loughborough, the greenhouse to kitchen program. Rotary is sowing seeds and supporting our youth in our community. we've heard wonderful stories about the various programs that we've been involved in, the exchanges or the ventures program. And in previous presentations, we've heard you say they've traveled or had experiences that they've never done before, met new people, developed new relationships from their participation in the Rotary programs. CK Rotary and the Youth Committee has decided to support youth that would not necessarily get the opportunities to have life experiences. Some kids don't have these opportunities, and we've decided to draw some of the kids from as Bill and Greg has mentioned, from the Pathways to Education community, the Boys and Girls Club, and hopefully from the Y programs, because that the different organizations spread beyond the postal code to be able to find youth and help them grow in our community. And I find great joy, and I can see Bill's enthusiasm. You think that I was vibrating. You can see Bill just start to bubble with enthusiasm, and it's infectious. And Greg and Anna as well, the joy and the thrill that we get to see these young people grow. I'd like to thank all the presenters and Bill organizing this for sharing their thoughts with us today. I think, if I speak for myself, but maybe for others, your words are sunshine and nourishment for us all. I know that young people learn and grow and hopefully share their knowledge so that others can also grow in strong, hardy, and fruitful members of our society. I like to think that we are planting with the youth. We are planting seeds in our programs so that these young people carry on our Rotary model of service before self. That gives me great hope that there's Rotarians there for the future. Thank you. I'd like to present this loaf of bread to Bill today. As many of you know, bread has been a staple of life throughout history and is seen in many forms in all cultures. The breaking and sharing of bread is symbolic of life, peace, and building of friendships. This loaf of bread is given to you, Bill, as a symbol of our friendship and in thanks for sharing with us today.